Well, a couple of weeks ago, we started a brand new worship series for the summer called Core. And the focus of this series is for us to really dig down and develop an understanding of who we are at our core, who we are designed to be, who God created us to be, what are the dreams that God has for us at the core of who we are, not just who we pretend to be on the outside, not just who we portray ourselves to be to others, but who we are at the core. And what does it look like for us to live a life of mission and vision and value? We've been looking at Shiloh's mission, vision, and value statements that if you haven't had a chance to pick one of these up yet, we have several of them in the back. It's just a brief overview of a long period of focus on what do we believe, who do we believe God is calling us to be as a church. And our mission, vision, and values are laid out here for you to see. And we thought that not only would we want to share these with you all summer long, but we'd want to challenge each of you to ask, what would it look like for you to live a life of mission, vision, and value? What would it look like if you had your own personal mission statement, or if your family had a set of core values or a vision for the rest of your life? What would that look like? And how would that change everything? Here at Shiloh, we've gotten very clear about why we believe we exist. And our mission is to develop disciples and change the world. That's it. That's why we gather. That's why we sing. That's why we celebrate. That's why we give. That's why we serve. That's why we have 220 kids running all over this building during vacation Bible school, because we believe that we are called into the ministry of developing disciples and changing the world. And this is why we exist. Last week, Pastor Brent challenged us that if we are truly going to be disciples, then we are going to have to be people who live a life of worship. And notice I didn't just say go to worship, as if worship is some event we go to or some place or some moment in our lives, but to live a lifestyle of worship. It's more about who you are than what you do. But what is worship? Because if worship is key to discipleship, we probably ought to ask the question, what is it? Is it just a song we sing? Is it a style of music? Is it a building we enter into? Is it a type of prayer? What is worship? Well, I thought maybe I could come up with a really short, easy, simple definition for you. And the more I wrestled with it, the more I realized this is a much bigger question than just a one-liner bumper sticker. Because worship is about a whole lot of things. If we really get into the core of worship, come back to the heart of worship as we sang about earlier, we got to recognize that worship is about God's glory. Worship is about recognizing what God is worth in our life. That's where the word worship comes from. Worship is about resetting my priorities so that Jesus has the primary seat in my life. Worship is about discipleship. Worship is about aligning my heart with God's heart so that I care about the things that God cares about, so that I get angry about the things that God gets angry about, so that I weep for the things that God weeps over. Worship is about aligning our hearts. It's about praise. It's about forgiveness. It's about community. It's about hope. It's about joy. It's about love. It's about a million things. But you know what it's not about? You. I'm just going to let that sink in for a second. I'm also going to give some of you a second to go, wait, what? And turn your ears this way, because at the end of the day, worship is not about you. Here's the deal. If worship is a key part of our discipleship journey, listen to what Jesus said about discipleship in Luke chapter 9. Jesus said to them, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must, and let me pause there, not should, not could, not ought to, but must deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow me. Whoever wants to save their life will lose it, and whoever loses their life for me will save it. For what good is it to gain the whole world and yet forfeit your very self? To give up your soul. So if we want to be disciples, worship as a part of discipleship, then what worship looks like is us denying ourselves, taking up our cross, and following Jesus. It was very clear on this. So I want to chat this morning just a little bit about what each of these looks like. What does it mean to deny ourselves? It is my belief and it is my contention that other than love your enemies, the hardest thing Jesus ever said, the most challenging command in the Bible, the most countercultural picture that God gave us was this command to love, to deny ourselves. A command to deny ourselves. And do you know why it's so hard? Because I'm selfish. I'm selfish. Are there any other selfish people out there? Am I the only selfish person? There are a few of you out there. The rest of you are just too selfish to raise your hands. Is that what it is, right? And I want you to know, most weeks when I'm preparing a message, I'm picturing you, I'm praying for you all in your heads. I just want you to hear me say that today's message is really not for you, it's for me. It's for me. And if you get something out of it, I think that's great. I think that's wonderful. And I think maybe God might have a word for you if you struggle with selfishness the way I struggle with selfishness. But I want to invite you to recognize that at the end of the day, you cannot be both selfish and deny yourself at the same time. It's not physically doable. And not only am I selfish, but I live in a world that rewards selfishness, right? I live in a world that is designed around and for me. You know, I hear Burger King say, you can have it your way, and I'm like, I'm in, right? That's the way I like it. I want it the way I want it, and I want it right now. Our core focus comes from this question, what's in it for me? You know, we ask that question, what's in this for me? What do I get out of this? Why would I want to do something if I'm not going to get something out of it myself? And when I ask the question, what's in it for me? I'm not just talking about the world. I'm not just talking about businesses. I'm not just talking about fast food or politics or any of these other things. I'm even talking about the church. Can I get a little close to home here for some of us? Sometimes we make church a whole lot about me. My needs, my wants, my style, my music, my carpet color, the way my bulletin is facing, whether it's long ways or sideways. And we get all freaked out over things if we feel uncomfortable, if we feel, disconnected, then we push against that because it's not about me. It's outside of my comfort zone. And if we're not really careful, we could end up in a church that looks a little like this. Watch this.
Imagine a church where every member is passionately, wholeheartedly, and recklessly calling the shots.
I have a busy work week, and by the time Sunday rolls around, I'm tired. So how about a church service that starts when I get there?
Can do. When you arrive, we begin.
This guy, he plays by his own rules. We want to find a church where if he starts screaming, we're not the bad guys, right? Come here.
Say no more. If your baby's screaming, you stay seated. The others around you can leave.
You know, financially, Sherry and I don't give a lot to the church, but we'd sure like to know who does.
All right, if you join now, you'll know what every person gives in detail.
When I'm in the church service, can my car get a buff and a wax?
Not just that, but an oil change and a tune-up.
Hey, how about tickets to the Super Bowl?
That's asking too much.
I'm serious. If I'm going to join, I want tickets to the big game.
All right, you join now and we'll get you there.
I like a pony.
Look in your backyard. Me Church, where it's all about you.
Now, I know we think that's kind of silly. And we're like, no, that's just kind of a goof. But let's get honest. Don't we want it our way? Even in church? Don't we ask what's meaningful for me, what's comfortable for me, what's familiar to me? This week, I had a conversation with somebody where I was sharing some kind of a vision of what we could do as a church. And I was talking about what would it look like if we as a church here in Delhi and in Price Hill, if we were able to leverage some of the resources God has given us in a different kind of way. What if we had $500,000 every year to put into mission and ministry outside the walls of this church? What if we were the church who planted a new church somewhere in the world every single year? What if we were the church who built schools in Zimbabwe? What if we were the church who eradicated malaria? What if we were the church who connected foster kids with forever families? What if we were that church? Wouldn't you want to go to that church? I would. And as I was sharing some of this long-term vision, I heard the phrase, "That's great, but it'll never happen." And I said, "Why?" And I was told, "Well, it's because we're West Siders." And I said, "West Siders? I know I'm new here," but he goes, yeah, we have a very conservative mentality around money and giving, and we're willing to give to the church. We just do it in our will. And so it's difficult for us to do that. And I said, what I was told was it would be difficult for us to ever get there. And I began really wrestling with what does it mean to deny ourselves? Because I describe myself in a dozen different ways. I describe myself as an American, right? I describe myself as a white middle-class male. I describe myself as an educated pastor. I describe myself as a father and a grandfather and a husband. And so I have all of these things that describe me. I hear once I've been here in Delhi for, I think you got to be here 60 years before you're really considered a West Sider. Is that right? No, I'm a West Sider as long as I got the zip code. So I'm a West Sider, and so as I've wrestled with what does it mean to deny myself, I think what I've come to is not to pretend like those descriptors don't exist, but to be willing to make those things that describe me secondary to who I am in Christ. Are you following me? So that everything you describe me in, that I'm a father, but that is secondary to being a child of God. That I'm a husband, but that is secondary to being a child of God. Whatever your political persuasion, if you're Republican, if you're Democrat, if you're Libertarian, wherever you are in the process, that is secondary to your descriptor as a follower of Jesus. And what would happen if rather than living by a West Side mentality, we lived by a Jesus mentality? Seems to me like maybe that's what it means to deny myself. Not to pretend I don't exist, but to make all that I describe myself secondary to Jesus. One of Paul's favorite passages, favorite ways to describe the church is he described them as you are not your own. You were bought with a price. You don't belong to yourself. You are not your own. You were bought with a price. If you belong to you, then you can do anything you want with you. But if you don't belong to you anymore, if you belong to Jesus because of the price paid for by you through his blood. And dads in the room, you know a little bit about denying yourself, right? You know how to deny yourself. Every dad in this room has looked at that last piece of cake and gone, all right, go ahead and have it. But you really wanted it, right? Every dad in the room has done that. Every dad in the room has gone to the recital or to the game or to the school thing, and you were like, but you went. When you had 1,000 other things to do, you went. You know why? Because it's not about you. We are not our own. We are bought with a price. So the first step in worship is to be willing to deny ourselves. Then Jesus says we need to take up our cross. And remember what a cross is for, right? See, we use crosses for decoration and for jewelry nowadays. Crosses are a symbol of worship for us. But when Jesus said this, the cross was not a symbol of worship. The cross was a symbol of torture and pain and humiliation. And Jesus says, pick up your cross. It'd be like Jesus saying, here's what I want you to do. Deny yourself and put a gun to your head. Deny yourself and drink the poison. Deny yourself and jump off the cliff. This is the drama that Jesus brings to this passage when he says, pick up your cross. Now, I know some of you said you were selfish. We're going to do a little selfishness poll here. Anybody ever find yourself complaining to God when things don't go your way? Oh, I do. Oh, God. And here's how it often goes. Something doesn't happen the way I want it to happen, and I get all self-righteous. God, look at all this stuff I'm doing for you. I'm preaching, I'm studying the Bible, I'm leading a Bible study, we're doing all this kind of good Jesus stuff. Where are you, God? Now, why won't you help me, get my car started? Why is it so hard to pay tuition? Why is it so difficult to make ends meet? God, you should make things easier for me. Look at all this stuff I'm doing for you. You owe me one. If you've ever been there, you can raise your hand again and say, I'm selfish. I do it a lot. And what I've learned in the course of my faith journey is that God is way more interested in my character development than God is in my comfort and my convenience. Do you know what I mean? That God is more interested in my character development than in my comfort and convenience. So when I start whining because I'm uncomfortable, when I start crying out to God because things are inconvenient, what God says is not, I'm going to fix that for you, Dave. What God says is, what are you learning through it, Dave? Because I'm building something in you. I'm doing something deeper in you. When Jesus says, pick up your cross, what I've learned in my faith journey is that you cannot carry Jesus' cross and your own baggage at the same time. It can't physically be done. Jesus' cross is just too big. So you have to choose what you're going to carry. Galatians chapter 2, verse 20 says this. It says, I've been crucified with Christ, and I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. The life I live in the body. I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself up for me. Now, if this verse isn't the ultimate in it's not about me, I don't know what is. Because what the writer here is telling us is that, listen, your own life doesn't even belong to you. If we call ourselves by Jesus' name, it means we put ourselves on this same cross that Jesus was willing to die on. And so for us, for me personally, that means I have to be willing to nail my selfishness to the cross. I have to be willing to nail my ego to the cross. I have to be willing to nail my pride to the cross, my preferences to the cross. I have to be willing to nail my very self to the cross so that the only thing left standing is the Jesus in me. Because when people look at disciples, they see Jesus. So what does it look like for you to take up your cross? What are the things that you have to nail to the cross in order for people to see Jesus through you? So Jesus says, deny yourself, take up your cross, and then he says, follow me. Follow me. One of the best followers I know of Jesus in the Bible is a guy named John the Baptist. And I love how they describe John the Baptist. He's kind of this crazy, eccentric kind of guy, wore camel's hair and ate bugs and, just this kind of a weird guy, weird-looking guy. And so John the Baptist, he said this, in order for me to truly follow Jesus, I must become less so he can become greater. I have to decrease so that he can increase. I have to step backward so that he can step forward. And see, when John was saying this, he was kind of a rock star himself. He had his own disciples. He had his own followers. And what he recognized was that in order for me to do this, I'm going to truly have to step back, deny myself, pick up my cross, and follow Jesus. The earliest creed in the Christian church, 3 simple words. Jesus is Lord. That's it. Jesus is Lord. And I've often told people, if you spend the rest of your life trying to figure out what that means and how to live into it, you're doing everything God's asking you to do. What does it mean that Jesus is Lord? And so I want you to know, from one selfish person to another, that it's perfectly natural for us to ask the question, what's in it for me? And here's the answer. When we try to gather and to create and to find meaning and significance and value all on our own, we always fail. We always fall short. But what God has promised us is that if we're willing to deny ourselves, if we're willing to take up our cross, and if we're willing to truly follow Jesus, it's in the following of Jesus that we will find the greatest joy of our lives. It's in the following of Jesus where you will find the greatest meaning and purpose for your life. It's in the following of Jesus where you will find the greatest satisfaction and fulfillment in life. Everything you're looking for comes from following Jesus. But you get there in a very countercultural kind of way by denying yourself and following Jesus. Psalm 62 says this, "Yes, my soul, find rest in God alone. My hope comes from him. Truly, he alone is my rock and my salvation. He is my fortress, and I will not be shaken. My salvation and my honor depend only on God. He is my mighty rock and my refuge. Trust only in him at all times. You people, pour out your hearts to him, for God is our refuge." Do you hear all the language about how it's in Christ and Christ alone? God only. God is the only one we can go to. Deny yourself. Pick up your cross and follow him. I want to share with you a little bit of a story of some people I've begun to get connected with who are doing this, or at least trying. Several months ago, I got a call from my boss, our district superintendent, who said, "Hey, there's a church down the road that needs some help. Would you be willing to go over and sit with them, chat with them, find out what's going on?" So I drove down to Saylor Park to a church called Eden Chapel. And I began to meet with some people who are passionate about being a missional presence in Saylor Park, who are passionate about being the hands and feet of Jesus in that community, but who have kind of run into some walls along the way. The more I got to know them, the more I got to hear about what God is doing and what's going on in their community, the more I got to learn about what's happening and what's not happening both in the church and in the community, I began to dream and pray, God, how could I help? What could I do? So I wrote a proposal to them. And the proposal to some of you may sound insane, because the proposal began with, we're going to shut down Sunday morning worship for a while. It said we're going to work on what it looks like to retool our thinking, to become disciple makers, not just church members. We're going to do everything differently. If it's not making disciples and changing the world, it's going to change or go away. We're going to call into question all of the things you may hold dear and the things you may be familiar with. And I put this proposal on the table, kind of half expecting most of them to laugh at me and kick me out of their building, to be honest. Last Sunday I was there, and they voted 28-9 to accept this proposal. The very first week where they won't have Sunday morning worship just so happens to be July 2nd, which is worship on the lawn. And so we've invited them to join us for worship on the lawn as our special guests. And we may see some of these folks as a part of our worship services here or at our 9:30 service or over at Price Hill over the next several weeks and months. And I promised them that we would greet them, we would love them, we would engage them, we would offer them opportunities to participate, we would serve alongside of them as they begin to work with me on Sunday evenings to begin to redream what a new church start in Sailor Park might look like if we were really willing to deny ourselves, pick up our cross, and follow Jesus. Now, I share this with you because two reasons. One, I want you to be willing to pray for our sisters and brothers, our neighbors at Eden Chapel down in Sailor Park. The other thing I want to do is I want to challenge you to ask the question, what would it look like? What kind of insane, crazy stuff would truly denying myself, picking up my cross, and following Jesus really look like? What would I be willing to do? And what is God calling me to? I'm so impressed that these faithful folks are willing to do some really kind of insane things in order to be the hands and feet of Jesus they believe God has called them to be. And so my prayer for them and for you is that each of us ask that question, what does it look like? Because at the end of the day, worship is not about you, but it is for you. Let me say that again. Worship is not about you, but it is for you. Because what worship does is it prepares you to develop disciples and to change the world. It puts you in a place, this lifestyle of worship, that though it's not about you, it is God working through you because of who God created you to be. If you choose to develop a set of personal mission, vision, and values for yourself or for your family, I want to encourage you that as you put those together, they're not about you, but they are about what God can do through you. For Shiloh, our mission, vision, and values are not about us sitting here in this building in Delhi, but it's about what can God do through us in this community, in Sailor Park, in the city of Cincinnati, in Ohio, in the world. Imagine what God could do through us if we were willing to deny ourselves, pick up our cross, and follow Jesus. Church, will you pray with me? God, I just ask that you give us some courage. What you're asking of us sounds terrifying. Some days it sounds insane. Some days it sounds like it'll never work. And yet, God, you know best. So God, whatever it looks like for me to set aside my selfishness, my pride, and my priorities, and put you as the number one thing in my life, give me the courage to begin heading down that path. Whatever cross you've called me to bear, whatever challenge you've asked me to face, whatever obstacle finds itself in my way, God, give me the strength and the courage to carry that cross, not on my own strength, but in your strength. And God, most of all, teach us what it means to follow you, recognizing that you don't stay on the safe path all the time, that often following you leads to danger, often following you leads to places we are unfamiliar with. And so, God, give us wisdom and courage to follow you wherever you go. God, it's in your powerful Son's name we ask all this. Amen.